the level of dot that is required may be a higher level of dot than regular kinyanim. Okay? That, what else did we see that was relevant to that? We talked about the level of dot. There was something else also. The necessity for amirah, right, might indicate, even though in general in kinyanim you do not require amirah, but in kiddushin you require, the man is required to say something. It's because what has to change is something much more fundamental. So even though we're talking about kinyanim, and we know all the, I'll say it again, right? We know all the problems that are associated with kinyanim, but it's a different type of kinyan. The change that's happening is a different type of change, and it's a much more fundamental change, and therefore we have more severe requirements of what has to happen in order to create this kinyan. You need a high level of dot, you need amirah, and you need not one kinyan, but two kinyanim. Look, the Yerushalmi thought that you need 3 kinyanim, right? So you come back to that, right? That chupah is a kinyan, but it's a second kinyan, but you need more than one kinyan, right? That's one way of looking at it.
Is it the that's the kinyan, or the second kinyan?
Oh, no. So in terms of what is, hold on. So what is chupah then, right? So we just have to look, before we get into the specifics, chupah in terms conceptually can either be looked as an additional kinyan, or it's not a kinyan at all. The kinyan happened with the kesef shtar of the beer, and that was kiddushin. But now there's something else that has to happen. Let's go back to the ra'ah. The positive relationship between them has to be established. That is not established through a kinyan. That's established through, quote unquote, some sort of action which displays ishut. But that's not a kinyan at all.
Does she
okay.
have to consent?
What?
Does she have to consent to this?
Of course, she has to consent
to the second kinyan.
To what's happening here. She would need to consent, right? But it's not a kinyan. Okay? So now let's say, okay, so what difference does it make? So first of all, the definition that I choose to accept for what is chuppah could hinge upon this. If chuppah is yichud, hara'ui l'biyah, or if chuppah is biyah itself, so then that takes us away from talking about it as a kinyan. It's a maaseh of ishut, but it's not necessarily a kinyan. But if I talk about the way the Gra talks about it, the Gra talks about a kinyan chatzer, right? The chatzer belongs to the chatan, so it's machniso tal l'rishuto, and that is what chupah is. That's what nisuin is. So then it's an additional kinyan. If you want to take it from the world of kinyanim, right? So you have kesef, we know what kesef is. Shtar, we know what shtar is. And biyah, the Yerushalmi says is like chazaka, because it initiates kinyan by doing it, right? And then we have another kinyan. The kinyan of lachnis l'shuto is like mashicha, right? Is when you bring the object, sorry to say, but as an analogy, when you bring the object into your domain, that makes it yours, okay? So in this case, it would be analogous to that. So we're talking about another kinyan. So if you talk about hachnis l'shuto, then you're talking about something which is a kinyan. If you talk about biyah, you're talking about yichud hara'ui l'biyah, so you're not necessarily talking about a kinyan, then you can be talking about a maseh shel ishut. Now what?
But he said biyah when he said kinyan.
Right. The Rambam's language is kinyan in any case. Yes.
Even with also.
Yeah. Even when he talks, even talks about biyah, and even the yichud hara'ui l'biyah, unless the kinyan that he's talking about there are all the obligations that occur. Right. You know, she becomes obliged to him in all the housekeeping duties, and he becomes obliged to her in the mizonot and in sher, ksut, and ona, and the rest of the list of l'rapota, l'ifdota, all the chiyuvei ketubah, and on those financial things you could say there's a kinyan, right? So it might not be a kinyan on her, but all the ramifications of everything around being married, maybe he's referring to that. Maybe yes, maybe no. I'm not sure.
Because he didn't say it in the first example. He only said it if you did biyah l'shem nisuim. That's the only place.
But he's describing that the nisuim is koneh. But the question is, does it mean the koneh her? Or that all the obligations occur now, and he's referring to that. Right? It's an open question. I would prefer to say the latter because I think if Chupah is Bia or Yichud Har'el lebia, it makes sense that it's not a kinyan, but it's just establishing the relationship in a way which is uniquely Even Ezer, and it's not connected to Choshen Mishpat in any way. Okay. Now, there are a number of questions that come up in terms of Nisuin that are relevant to this point. Okay. The first is, let's take a look here in the second set of sources I sent you, is, oh no, it's only the first set of sources. The Or Sameach, right? The Mason from Lidvinsk had two questions here which are related, which are specifically related. The Or Sameach in Perek Yud al-Chabet. Okay, on the Rambam's line, Kem Jenichasa Usa lechupa harei zo muteret v'chulei, v'harehi ishto gmura l'chol davar. Mistapak natuva im chupa bay edim. Okay? O sagi b'hoda'at shnehem. If it's enough that both should admit it, it means there are two types of eduyot, which we didn't spell this out yet. I don't think we're going to devote a special shir to this, but it's just something that we need to know, though. That there are two types of eduyot, right? It's based on the Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Samech Hey. It says Lo Ivru Sahadi Ela L'Shikra. Okay, that means the only reason you acquire edim is because people lie. What's the function of edim? The function of edim is to establish the truth. Their function is basically they are neutral observers, and their function is to tell us what happened. Okay, that's one way. That's lo ivru sahati el l'shakra. It's evidence. It doesn't change what happened. It just tells the court what happened. But we have to know what happened. Okay, so if that's the case, then if hoda'at shnehem, they both come and they say, yes, we did chuppah. We were in the chuppah together, so we accept that. Okay, so you don't need edim. Okay, so you maybe would require edim if maybe somebody denies that it happened, right? If the woman says no, I never went to the chuppah with this guy, or he denies that he went to the chuppah. Says okay, whether edim or they're not edim. Okay, so there the function of the edim is just to establish as evidence what happened. Then there's another type of edut, which is called edut l'kiyum hadavar, edut l'kiyum hamilta, right? Where there the function of the edim there are participants in the action. Their presence makes the kiddushin or the gerushin, makes it kiddushin or gerushin, and without the edim there is no kiddushin or gerushin. Okay? It's not that we can't establish whether there was or not, but they actually they participate in creating that reality. Okay, that's called edut l'kiyum hadavar. Okay, so that's what he wants to know. Do we require edut l'kiyum hadavar when it comes to nisuin? In kiddushin, we do. Okay, that's what the Rambam stresses. Right, the Rambam says before Matan Torah there was no formal action. Haya, right? What does he say? Ratzahu v'hi. And he stresses beino leveinat, right? Beino leveina. It's a totally private thing. There's no edim. But then he says, but mishenitna Torah, right? Shekno tatchila bifnei edim, right? That's part of it. The edim there are not there just to establish that it happened. The edim there are there to make it happen. Okay, and that just in terms of the nature of marriage makes a lot of sense. Marriage, by its very nature, is a public act. Okay? And therefore, you need edim there to make it a public act. The fact that somebody can testify that it happened, right? You need somebody there that can testify that it happened in order that it should happen. Okay? That's edut l'kiyum hadavar.
Is that really a hard and fast requirement? Meaning if two people come out of the woods and each one says, he said, Har'el mekudeshet, we say what about them?
the no Eidim,
Lo haya devar.
lo haya davar. Lo haya davar. Okay? Okay. I mean, this has to do with common law marriage and things like that. When you say, but there you could be there's anan sahade, right? But that's when we talk about common law marriage. We'll talk about that. Okay. So his question is chupah mistapakna tuva im chupah by edim o sagi behodat dishnehem o dilma havi kimo kiddushin de by edim u behodat shnehem einam mikudeshet hachinami chupah. Okay. And he kicks that back and forth. He's not sure. And then he asks another question. Or let's before the second question. All right. So now let's analyze the question. I think the analysis is pretty straightforward. If you say that chuppah is a kinyan, and it's a kinyan that creates ishut, then you need edim, just like you need edim in kesef, shtar, and bia of kiddushin. Then you need edim in chuppah, because it's a maaseh kinyan, and maaseh kinyan in ishut, which changes status, requires edim. Right? If, however, it's not a kinyan, there's no reason to assume you need edim. Edim is there as part of the kinyan. There are areas in Dinei Mamonot where also you need an edim for kinyanim in certain cases. But let's leave that aside. Right? But if it's not a maseh kinyan, then you shouldn't require edim. Okay? Then he asks another question, and this is very important. O dinanim stapek tuva im yesh tnai b'chuppah. Hainu la'achar shekidesh ota v'na'aset arusato kinsa b'tnai. There's not a tnai in the kiddushin. It's a tnai in the nisuin. Okay? Right? Kinsa b'tnai she'im lo yitein lakach v'kach o tnai acher lo yeh nisuin. Mi chayil bazet tna'o o lo. Does the tnai take effect or not? And therefore, and what's the nafkamina? If the Tanai is not fulfilled, will there be Nisuin nonetheless? Or maybe there'll be no Nisuin. If the Tanai, this we'll talk about when we talk about the relationship between the Tanai and the Maaseh. You have a legal action, and then you have a Tanai which limits that action. Okay, and that we have to understand. Okay? But let's put that aside. Okay? But he's saying that if you make a condition, and you have the right to make a condition, if that condition is not fulfilled, then the action is void. Right? I'm only buying the house if you deliver the whatever, if you fix the plumbing to the house first, right? If it didn't, and I do a kinyan, and you don't do what you're supposed to do, so then the mekach is batel, right? So a person, man or a woman, stipulates b'shat kiddushin, Har'el mikudeshet li, or she makes a tanai that al menatcha ta'ashir, al menatcha ta'tzadik. These are cases in the Mishnah, and it's not true, right? Or al menatcha makes a tanai al menatcha yirtza abba. I don't know why somebody would do such a thing, right? But these are right if your father agrees. So if then the tanai is biyad the father, and if he disagrees, there's no kiddushin. Okay. So is this true of nisuin as well?
Is it obvious too that the only way that we can, it's that a woman could change her status is through kinyan? Could there not be a change of status that doesn't involve being acquired by someone else?
So that has to look. We talked about this. The language of kinyan. Say it again. The language of kinyan is profoundly disturbing. Right. The question is, to what extent do I take the language literally? So he saw to take the language literally in terms of the acquisition in a Dinei Mamonot way would really be not accurate in reading the Sugyot. But the language of Kinyan is still problematic. So in other words, by virtue of him, of the man, there's something about her which there's something about her. It changes something in her. Right? But it's not financial, right?
There's still an acquiring.
There's an acquiring, but not in the way that something belongs to him. It's by virtue of him there's an Isra Ishet Ish. There's something else.
But that's I still don't get how you. Whatever.
It doesn't belong.
It only is. He is the only one who can use her for sexual pleasure.
Well,
No
the
one
question-
else can. He's the only. She's in his domain. He's taken her. All the actions are.
But it's not
doing
financial.
something to her.
Okay.
Wait, why is this relevant now?
Okay, so we want to know this because we keep coming back to it. Okay.
Because Rav Hefter has set up a dichotomy. Either there's a Maseh Kinyan, or
Well, in Nisuin, so it may very well, but then Nisuin, it would have what you want, right? In other words, you can't get away from the Maseh Kinyan of Kiddushin, right?
Creating a second one.
But
so
but this, to establish the positive relationship between them, right? There, it's not a Kinyan. There, it's something else. There, it's something that belongs unique. There's something else, no other word for it, that belongs in the laws of Ishut, and it does not belong in the language of Kinyan. Okay? And that one is, do you par Eidim or not? Two, would a T'nai work? Okay? Now, a T'nai, this is, actually, let's just see his rationale here. Umakora Safek, see that? In the second section of the Or Samech. Yeah? Umakora Safek, second line. Hu al pi shenitba'er beperek hamadir in Ketubot Ayin Dal Amud Aleph de chalitza lo chayil t'nai levatel ma'aseh. You can't make a t'nai in chalitza. Okay? That's what the Gemara says. That means if the man says, Hareini choletzlach al menat shetitni li 200 zuz, and he does the chalitza, she is nechletzet, whether she fulfills the t'nai or not. The fact that the chalitza took place, it means she's nechletzet. Okay? You cannot make chalitza al t'nai. That's what the Gemara says. And the Gemara gives the rationale. Why is that? Okay. Mishum dimitnai b'nei Gad u'b'nei Reuven yalfinan. Right, that we learn the halachot of Tanaim from the story of b'nei Gad u'b'nei Reuven. De hama'aseh yichola lihitkayem al yidei shaliach. So b'nei Gad u'b'nei Reuven, what they have to do? They had to go and fight with everyone else. They could have sent other people. They would have hired mercenaries to do the fighting. That also would have been good. In other words, the Tanai could be fulfilled by a shaliach. Okay? I'm sorry, the Ma'aseh. Sorry, the Ma'aseh could be done by Yidei Shaliach. The Ma'aseh is the Nachala, right? There could be Nochel Yidei Shaliach. The Kiddushin Efshar Yidei Shaliach, right? So you can do Kiddushin Yidei Shaliach. So that's why you can do a Tanai. Okay? That's what the Gemara says. What about Bia?
So that's the action could be fulfilled?
Right, the action could be fulfilled.
Or that the condition
I changed it. I made a mistake when I said the condition. The action can be fulfilled through Tanai, through Shlichut. Okay? The Kiddushin the Bia Gam Ken Mishum the Itkash Havayot Hadati. So Bia, even though you can't do Bia Yidei Shaliach, but it's still a Kinyan Kiddushin, and all the Kinyanim have the same halacha. So since you can do Kesef and Shtar Yidei Shaliach, so you can make a Tanai, and a person can also make Kaddish al Tanai even with Bia. Okay? Even though Bia itself cannot be done Ayidei Shaliach. Okay? Im Kain, now this is his question. Chupah shegomeret ha'im yichola litkayem Ayidei Shaliach u'mehara'ui shelo yo'il batnai lo matzanu she'alfinan havayot lahadadi chupah l'kiddushin. So chupah can't be done Ayidei Shaliach. So maybe for that reason, chupah cannot have a Tanai. Okay? And you can't say what you say by Bia, by Kiddushay Bia, because chupah is not Havaya, the same way the other things are. Okay? So what the way Kesef and Shtar and Bia are, there it says Itkish Havayot Lahadadi, Ki Yeh Leish. Right? So there's Itkish Havayot Lahadade. But chupah is not that. Chupah is in a different category all by itself.
I mean, you can't tell, because you can't tell someone else, hey,
you can't make a shaliach.
Bring my wife into your house for me.
Right. You can't do it Ayidei Shaliach. Okay? So he says, since you can't do it Ayidei Shaliach, so you shouldn't be able to make a Tanai, or maybe not. Okay? So what's the issue? Okay? The issue really goes around, for this, to really understand this, this is I would really say, a crucial Reb Chaim. General Reb Chaim is, when you learn halacha, you stay away from Reb Chaim. But, because his interest wasn't in paskening. But this is a very central idea in understanding how kinyanim and how various actions work, and to understand what the Gemara is talking about when it says that milta de'ika b'shlichut ita b'tnai, milta de'leta b'shlichut leta b'tnai. How we bind those two halachot together. That's something that you can fulfill through shlichut. You can make a condition. And something that you can't do through shlichut, you can't make conditions. Okay? So for example, okay, let's take I can make you a shaliach to buy something for me, right? Go to the store, get me a bag of milk. And I make you a shaliach, so that when you do the kinyan on the milk, it becomes mine. You're not just doing me a favor and you're bringing me the milk, but you're actually my shaliach, right? So that you can do shlichut to do a kinyan. Okay? A man can make a shaliach ha'ish mekadesh bo b'shlucha. The woman can also make a shaliach to be mekabel the kiddushin. Kiddushin is ayidei shaliach. So kiddushin you can have a tanai also. Okay? But something that you can't do ayidei shaliach, here's an example, just to bring it home. If I say it's hot in here, open the window, right? Technically speaking, you're not really my shaliach. You're just doing me a favor. But you're not acting on my behalf. And
your status doesn't
just
change.
Because anytime you have shlichut, just to get to the bottom of this is like basics, just to understand what's happening in kinyanim and what's happening here. When you talk about a kinyan, or you talk about something happening al-yedei shaliach, you basically have two things. You have the action, and you have the legal ramifications of the action. Okay, what's called in the terminology the chalot, the chalais, right? When the action takes place. In other words, you do a ma'aseh kinyan, and the object becomes yours, right? So there's the action. And then there's the taking effect of the action. So in Kiddushin, the man does the Ma'aseh Kiddushin, and the woman becomes an Isser Eshet Ish. In other words, there's a ramification. There's the physical action, and then there's the legal ramifications of that action. Okay? To talk about opening or closing a door, opening and closing a window, and to break it up that way would be brisk gone mad. Right? In other words, you can't say, well, physically I opened the window, and now there's a halachic status to the window being open. But there's no such thing as a halachic status of the window being open. The window is just either open or closed. It's just a physical reality. Okay? So you can't make a shaliach on a physical reality. Okay? You can only make a shaliach on a halachic reality. Do this action, you do the action, but the ramifications of the action relate to me. So right? So you do, let me just bring it home. You do the Maaseh Kinyan, you go to the store, you do the Hagbah on the bag of milk, right? So physically you did the action, right? But what is the ramification of the action? Is a change of ownership. That bag of milk now no longer belongs to the Baal HaMakolet. It belongs to someone else. But to whom? To me, not to you, because you did it for me, right? I made you a shaliach, and you did it for me. So the ramifications, you can split. This is very important to understand Tanaim as well. You can split between the physical act and the legal ramifications. Okay? But if there is no such, but if there are no legal ramifications, I'll let you. I'll say it, right? But if there are no legal ramifications, this is just a physical reality, then there's nothing to talk about. Then you can't have shlichut. The window is either open or closed. There's no status of the open window. Right? There's no. If there was a if there was some sort of halachic status to the open window, then there could be shlichut. Right? But if it's just a physical reality, so then you're doing me a favor. Why are you doing it? Because I asked you to, but you're not technically speaking my shaliach. That's why ain't shliach. That could be why ain't shliach l'dvar aveira and all these type of things. And mitzvot shebegufo, there's no shlichut. I can't make you a shliach to put on tefillin for me, right? Because I'm either wearing the tefillin or I'm not, right? It's a physical reality. Okay, so okay, and for the same reason that there's no shlichut in opening and closing the window, and here it becomes abundantly clear. There's no t'nai of opening and closing the window. I can't say the window was open b't'nai. it's either open or closed, right? I have no power to say, well, it's only open if I agree. Well, is it open or not? Are you with me? You can't make a physical reality upon some condition. The physical reality is either yes or, they say in Yiddish, oder ja oder nicht, right? It's either open or closed. Either this is the physical reality or it's not. It's not up to you to say, I only accept this physical reality on condition, right? So you can't, where you don't have, because what making a Tanai does, it also recognizes this dichotomy between the action and the legal ramifications of the action. I can say, I'm doing this action of a kinyan, right? But so I did a physical action, right? I did the chalipin, I did the meshicha, I did the chazaka, right? I did the physical action, but and that's not in dispute. Did I do a maaseh of meshicha? Yeah, I did a maaseh of meshicha. But the ramifications of that, namely that there's a transfer of ownership as a consequence of the physical action that I did, that depends on my dot. And whether I want it or not. Because I move things around all the time. It doesn't mean that I'm kona them. I have to have dot to be kona, right? So once it depends upon my dot, in other words, the ramifications of the action depend upon legal intent, then I can make that intent conditional. I say, I intend, if this, then I intend yes. And if that, then I intend no. The action is the action, but the ramifications are dependent upon my dot. And that is what lies at the core of the ability to make a shaliach. And that's what lies at the core of the ability to make conditions. Okay? That's all in order to understand what Reb Chaim is about to say. All right? Yeah, you have a question?
So that basically, if we understand Chupah as the creation, as the formation of a relationship, not as a kinyan.
Hold on. So we'll get there. Hold on. Okay, so let's see Reb Chaim. So Reb Chaim talks about chalitza as opposed to kiddushin. Okay? Vasher Har'el Omar. This is really like one of the most important foundations that Reb Chaim put down. Okay? Vasher Har'el Omar b'dat Rambam. Okay, the sphere of the lo ba'ina midoraita edim klal gabe chalitza. Okay, the Rambam says you don't need edim for chalitza. K'damash mekain pashtut hasugya. All right. Damash with the chalitza be'emet hi chalitza k'sheira v'rak da'anan lo yad'ina. Right. Again, if you require edim in chalitza, it's only to let us know what happened, but not because the edim constitute part of the chalitza. Okay. Whereas if it was filmed, it would also be good. You don't need edim. Okay. V'atam b'zeh nir'eh. Daha mishum d'matzinu trei gavnei eduyot b'davar shebe'erva. This is foundational. There are two types of eduyot. That's what the biznut harei kaimelan delo ivru sahadi edel shakre. Right. In order to establish if someone did something wrong, right? Evidence, right? It's in znut. So the davar shebe'erva, you need two edim. But there, the function of the edim, if there was an isser that was perpetrated, it was perpetrated with or without edim knowing. The only reason we need edim is in laws of evidence in order to inflict punishment. Okay, so that's lo ivru sahadi el shakri. Kemuvuar b'ktubot daftet bemet neseret gam below edim. So that's one type. That's edut livarer et hadavar. Okay, v'kiddushina ubegitin v'kiddushina yedei edim hu shemekayma milta. Right, that establishes what happened. K'dekaimelan shamikadesh magaresh below edim lo havi kiddushin v'gerushin v'achiluk beinehem hahavi. This is the distinction. The biznut ha'isur b'mimela. Right, the isur is the isur, as they say, ada yad nisht. Right, not what President Clinton said. I did not have sex with that woman. Right, but it's ada yad nisht. Right, so it's just a question of fact. It's not a question of legal ramifications of the fact. It's just the fact, right? The biznuta iser b'mimela. Al kain lo ivru sahadi el shakre. Ma she'en kain begitin v'kiddushin. The haba'al hu she'oseh etzam ha'gerushin v'kiddushin. V'ha'isur v'ha'heter. Al kain tzarich edim l'kiyuma milta. It doesn't happen by itself. There's a physical action, but then there's what happens as a consequence of that physical action. And that depends on dot. And that's why you need Eidim. Not Eidim in order to clarify whether it happened, but Eidim to make as part of what make it happen. Okay? Now, V'nir muchrach mizeh, da chaluk din gerushim v'kidushim din chalitza and lishma. This is writing about a get lishma, not our issue. Okay? The begerushim v'kiddushin tzarich dat ba'alim al etzem ha'gerushin v'akidushin. Umishum de'ikar ha'kiddushin v'agerushin na'asa al yidei ha'ba'alim. In other words, there's somebody that is creating the legal reality. Okay? Happens to be the man. Okay? So the man is creating the legal reality. As opposed to what? Okay, let's see. V'heim ha'usrim v'heim ha'matirim. V'al kein tzarich da'atam. In formal language, okay, the man is the gavra. In other words, he is an active halachic being who's creating a change of status. Okay? And that's why you need his da'at. Okay? And that's why you need edim. Okay? V'heim ha'usrim v'heim ha'matirim. V'al kein tzarich da'atam. V'lo mahanya oke masha achirim melamdim otam. If they don't have da'at, then it's no good.
Wait, so the eidim in this case are there to verify that he knows what he's doing
No,
and has da'at?
no. They're there to to solidify his da'at. In other words, if a person does something and no eidim, they don't do it as seriously as if there is eidim. Okay? That's part of the whole mahalach, which I don't want to go into now. Okay? Now, this is juxtaposed to what happens in chalitza, and it's important for us to understand. Okay, masha'enke b'chalitza v'lishma, ein behen din da'at ba'alim. There, even though you would say you need da'at, but it's not the same. Rak kavana. He makes a very important distinction here between da'at and kavana. How would we translate it between da'at and kavana? Huh? Kavana.
Like awareness versus intent?
It'd be awareness, and da'at is more active. It's more like intent. Okay?
Kavanah is...
I don't want to get caught up on that thing. Da'at is...
Which is the bigger?
The bigger is da'at. Okay? Da'at means, let's say, directed action. Right? The direction that you give to an action would be da'at. Okay? Whereas kavanah would be just awareness of what you're doing. Right? Where I intend to do what I'm doing, but da'at is a higher level of directedness, directed consciousness. I'm borrowing like from Indian terminology, right? Directed consciousness as opposed to simple awareness. Okay, you with me? So then, let's see how he describes it. Okay, v'rak kavanahu deba'inan al etzem ma'aseh hachalitza v'aptur memele ba midin Torah. This is what it is. In chalitza, what do I need? I need there should be a man there. I need there should be a shomeret yavam there. I need there should be a foot there. I need there should be a na'al there. I need that there should be rok there. And I need that there should be kavana there. That's how I'm putting it. Because there's a chulent of different requirements that I need in order that this woman should become muteret. When I have all these different elements the same place at the same time, she's muteret. What's matirota? The Torah is matir. Okay? When you have the rok and the na'al and the woman and the man and he does this, so then she's muteret. He was not the one that was matir her. He is like a potato in the cholent. Right? It's just one of the things that you require. Think of it this way. Think of basa b'chalav. Okay? What makes basa b'chalav? If the basa falls into the cooking chalav and nobody knows about it, and there was no intention, it's still basa b'chalav. It's the reality of basa b'chalav which makes it basa b'chalav.
It's the same thing as the yibum not requiring intention.
Exactly.
Because it's the original husband that's all the...
Right, he required the intention. Now it just has to be consummated or transferred. So there, when there's a certain reality occurs, the Torah says this is the halacha. But it didn't empower it. In the end of the day, it's always the Torah that says this is the halacha. But the question is what mechanism is being used. Is there an active agent which the Torah empowered, right? But there's an active agent changing the status, or is it just the reality which the Torah then sort of ex post facto says, now this is the halacha? In Basar B'chalav, there's no active agent that turns the meat and the milk into Basar B'chalav and an Isser Hana, right? It doesn't matter if there's a person doing it or not. Okay?
In the chalitza, they still, it's more than basar v'chalav, right?
Yes, but my point is it's not really. You need kavana the way you need basar, and the way you need chalav, and the way you need temperature, right? And the way, it's just...
But it can't be sleeping. I mean, it can't be
because
sleepwalking.
but not because he's creating it. You just need a cognitive action. But it does not have to be directed, because it's the yavam is not the one who is empowered to give the chalitza. He's not giving her chalitza. He's facilitating the chalitza. The way the Nile facilitates the chalitza. The way the rope facilitates the chalitza. He's just another element in the necessary list of requirements for the Torah to say, now she's muteret. But there it's the Torah directly saying she's muteret. As opposed to Gittin and Kiddushin, where it's the husband who creates the Isser, he is Mikadesh her. He is Migaresh her. Right? So he is the one that creates it. Right? So in some cases you need her opinion, her approval, sometimes you don't, right? In Gerushin, you don't even need her to agree. Al pi din Torah. Right? Shamit Gareshet, Bal Korcha. So in Kiddushin you do, and that we talked about. Okay?
So if you did chalitza, it said, I'm aware I'm doing chalitza, my intention is not to do chalitza. Is that chalitza?
Yeah.
It is.
It is.
Yes.
Right? That would be chalitza anyway. Right? If he doesn't know he's doing chalitza, if he's mitasek, he thinks he's just tying the shoe, right? So then that's not chalitza, because it's not a cognitive action. Right? So mitasek would not be good, because that's not considered an action at all.
This
But
is based on what?
this is based on the sugyot, based on the fact that chalitza, there's no shlichut in chalitza, and there's no t'nai in chalitza.
But all that begs the question. In other words, it's based on...
Oh, why is that? Because that's the way...
Where would I...
All right, so this is where it's just empirical, that based on the data, chalitza is like this, and kiddushin is like that. Like why that should be, because I think Mish sort of alluded to it, because you're already dealing with a status which was created already, and so right, you already had the kavana in the kiddushin, and now we have a different type of ishut because it was transferred. So now we have to unpack that, and that's different than taking a regular isur eshet ishin being matured. I mean, that would be some sort of rationale. Okay, doesn't necessarily follow, but based on empirical data, there's a difference. Okay, so now what Reb Chaim is saying about chalitza is really the question that you would ask about Nisuin as well, and Chupah as well. That's why I went into this Reb Chaim. Because what is the two sfeikot that the Or Sameach has really goes to the core of what's happening in Nisuin. Okay? Is Nisuin like a kinyan? In other words, in the context of Ishut, that means that Ha'ish nosei et Ha'isha. He, starting with the Kiddushin, he finishing the Kiddushin, right? This is with the language of Ishto Gemura, right? That language, right? He has to finish it. When there's just Kiddushin, he Ishto, avalo Ishto Gemura, right? Because to create Ishto Gemura, you have to do two kinyanim. Right? So he's continuing, he's doing the next kinyan. So if that's how I view Nisuin, so then you should need Eidim, because you're doing the kinyan. It's a kinyan of Ishut, and you need Eidim. And you should be able to do it al Tanai. Right? And the fact that you can't do it al Yidei Shlichut is for incidental reasons. Because you can't have Bia, you can't have Yichud, you can't make a Shliach have Yichud with your Arusa. Right? So it's only for technical reasons. But the real reason that something that doesn't have Shlichut doesn't have Shlichut doesn't have Tanai is because you only have Shlichut and Tanai where you are the initiator, the halachic agent to create the change. When the Torah empowers you as the agent of change, there you have power over the action. We need your dot. You need dat in order to point to shaliach and to make that split that the shaliach does the action, but the effect of the action applies to me. And you need dat in order to say, even though the physical action occurs, I'm holding the legal ramifications in abeyance until my dat is satisfied, as formulated in the Tanakh. Okay? So hold on. So if if Nisuin is a kinyan, so then you should require edim. And even though, for technical reasons, you can't do it at shaliach, but you should still be able to do it tonight. Okay? But if we say that Nisuin is not a kinyan, then it's like chalitza. Right? It's like basar b'chalav. It's like opening the window. In other words, how is this new relationship established? It's established de facto. There's just a reality. Right? Whether it is he brought her into, now they're living together. That's not a legal ma'aseh with a chalot. The legal ma'aseh with the chalot happened in the kiddushin. Right? Now it's just happening bashetach. Right? It's just a reality. The way the window is open or closed. You can't make a condition upon a reality. Right? It's either open or closed. So either they're living together or they're not. Either there was chuppah or there wasn't chuppah. Chuppah is a mitziut. It's not where one person is empowered as an agent to make the change. Okay? It's just a change of the reality which the Torah recognizes.
So when the Rambam says biyad l'shem nisuin, that would not be consistent with this, right? Because there it has to be l'shem nisuin. It can't be.
Well, it can't be l'shem bilad znut. So it would be, otherwise it would be like
mitaseh. It
mitaseh.
shouldn't have to be l'shem anything according to this. It should be a physical reality, and that's it.
But there's still an action which has to happen. Just in the same way that chalitza, right, without any intent would not be good, right? But even if I say I'm doing it, so right, the truth is l'shem, and he also uses the language of kinyan, so maybe the Rambam doesn't hold that way, okay? But the safek that I can still weasel it into the Rambam, but I definitely appreciate your point. But the safek that we have in the Achronim about Eidut and about Tanai does go to the very nature of what Nisuin is. Okay? And that's connected with, technically speaking, how I define Nisuin. Whether I say Nisuin is Bia, Nisuin is Yichud HaRoy LaBia, etc. Or it's something which is clearly borrowed from Kinyanim, where the Gras talks about it, of Knisal Shuto. And Henuma also would seem to take it in the direction of kinyanim and not in the direction of ishut. Right? Just put something on her which shows that they're married. Right? But it's not it's not connected to bia at all. Okay? Now here you get an interesting thing where I just want to talk about what the safek of the Mishnah Melech, and how is it that you could think that the chuppah could come actually before the kiddushin. Okay, if I view chuppah and nisuin as a maaseh of ishut, so you need the kinyan first. That's what the Rambam says. Yikneu tatchila, right? V'achar kach yavo elayha, right? So you need so there it doesn't make any sense to have the chuppah beforehand. If it's a maaseh of ishut. If, however, it's a kinyan, and you say the halacha is that you need two kinyanim, because what happens in Eshet Ish, I see people are melting already, just hold on, okay? What's happening, it's much easier to give shir than it is to listen to a shir, okay? What's happening, most of the time, except like when Joe asks a hard question, then it's easier to be sitting in the audience. I'm melting down also. So what was I saying?
Mission of the man.
Right. So if I view the chuppah as a kinyan, and I say you need two kinyanim, so then I can start playing around. Well, maybe it doesn't matter what the order is. In other words, chuppah by itself is nothing. But if I did chuppah and then I did kiddushin, so then I have the two kinyanim. But still, but if it was nothing and then you did it, so how does that work? See, here I want to borrow, there's this idea of in kinyanim called kalta kinyano, that the act of a kinyan can be continuous. Even in dinim omonot, you can have, if you do mashicha and it's still in your reshut, so you can make the kinyan bichal later, as long as it's still in the reshut, because the action of the chuppah, of the knisa lechuppah, could be that is sort of a present perfect. It's a continuous action.
What was the phrase? What do you call it? A kinyan?
Kalta kinyano. It's a Gemara in. Maybe I'll bring it to you next time, just so you see. It's a Gemara in Kiddushin and Daf Samach, where the action that was done is continuous, as opposed to kesef. Once you give the money is spent and then it's gone. Right? But there are certain types of kinyanim which are considered continuous. So maybe, I'm just speculating, the idea that you could have chuppah before kiddushin is based on the fact that you have two kinyanim, and there's something continuous about the chuppah. There's just the way you stand in the chuppah, the husband and wife stand in the chuppah before the kiddushin, right? But after the kiddushin, they're still under the chuppah, right? So it's a continuous situation. So it could be that technically you would do the heinuma first, but it's not the heinuma, right? But the fact is that now she still has the veil on, right? So it's a continuous situation, so that when you do the kiddushin, you already had the chuppah, and there's a connection between the two actions. Okay? That's why some people, generally briskas, they're makbid that the eitim should see the badekin. I don't know if you're aware of that. Okay. Okay. One last point here, and that goes to, connected to this, is the Gemara in Kiddushin on Daf Gimel, where it discusses the possibility that maybe chuppah is koneh on Daf Gimel on Daf Hey, right? The Gemara says Gimel Mid Aleph, right? Minyana dereisha lemu'utei mai. When it says Yishan nikneit begimel drachim, so why does it say I can count? Could have just said Yishan nikneit bekesef shtar bia, and I know that it's 3, right? Maybe 4 or 5 I'd have a problem once I get more past one hand, right? But certainly up to 3 I can count, right? So minyana dereisha lemu'utei mai, minyana d'seif lemu'utei mai, minyana dereisha lemu'utei chuppah, right? Because I would have half a meaning of the chuppah shmikoneh, so 3 and not 4, okay? Rav Huna de Amar chuppah koneh mikal v'chomer lemu'utei mai. But Rav Huna we have machlokas amoraim, where the chuppah is koneh. Not as nisuin, but the chuppah is koneh for kiddushin, right? So then with lemutei chalipin, all right, not our issue. Very interesting sugya, but it's not our issue. Okay, so there's a machloket amoraim whether chuppah is koneh, and you have this whole discussion here on Daf Hey. Amar Rav Huna chuppah koneh mikal v'chomer. Uma kesef sheino machil b'truma koneh. Chuppah shema'achelet b'truma eno din shetikneh. All right, and then there's a whole discussion there. Now, the whole assumption of chuppah being koneh for kiddushin is clearly treating chuppah as a kinyan, right? And the Kal Vachomer talks about kinyan betchila and kinyan basof, right? Here. Okay, lo rizekuri yizeh. Hatzad Hashem shebehen shekonim ba'alma v'konim kan af ani v'chupa shekonim ba'alma v'konim kan. What is konim ba'alma? Nisuin, right? Chuppah is konim someplace else. Kesef, shtar, and bia, they're all konim someplace else, and they're konim, so therefore they should be konim. They're konim here. Chuppah is also konim someplace else. Chuppah is konim nisuin, so it's konim here, right? So the whole discussion only makes sense if chuppah is a kinyan. Chuppah is not a kinyan, so then it falls off. Chuppah is not koneh b'makom acher. Chuppah is effective b'makom acher, but not as a kinyan. So therefore, just because chuppah is the mitziyut of being married, which initiates marriage, that doesn't mean that it should be koneh where you need a kinyan tchila. Doesn't follow, right? And that would be the answer. That really is the answer to Rav Huna. Right? So the question of whether chuppah is koneh for kiddushin depends on this question. Because I could still say it's only koneh basof, But if I raise the possibility that it's kona as kiddushin, it certainly shows that I'm looking at chuppah as a kinyan. Okay? If I say no, that chuppah is not kona for kiddushin, I can still say it's a kinyan, but it's only a kinyan after you've done kiddushin. It's kinyan number 2, and it has to be number 2. Or it means it's really not a kinyan at all. Okay? Now, what's the important thing here that I want to look into next week is the whole issue of Tanai. Tanai, fundamentally Tanai be Kiddushin, possibly, and this opens up the understanding of how a Tanai works and what it means when you move. And I have to talk about, we're going to have to learn something about Mishpatei Tanaim, the concepts I already gave you. I'll give you sources on Mishpatei Tanaim, and I'll also send you the Kuntras. It's like a 60-page Kuntras. It's I was pretty impressed, pretty easy reading for halachic material. Read through it. And I'll tell you, I'll go through the whole thing. I'll tell you what chapters you can skip. The Kuntras of Chachmei Constantinople. And I'll also send you some Chuvot. And have to dig up.
What's that Kuntras?
There's a Kuntras of Tanai B'Kiddushin.
In the Ein Tanai B'Kiddushin?
Well, no, the Ein Tanai is the people that attacked them. They wanted to come up with the Takanat to make a Tanai for Takanat Agunot.
In Constantinople?
Yeah.
Oh, it's interesting. When I was reading the history, I understood it as coming out of France.
Oh, so there was the Chachmei Paris also. They want to base themselves. There's a whole history that started in Constantinople and in Paris and in Cairo, and in Lita they heard about it and they went ballistic and they buried it.
Yeah.
It was I can't remember. It was the Bezdin in Vilna, and they wrote the Kuntras Ein Tanai B'Kiddushin. Okay, and that had to do with by then it was already the 1930s. It started, I think, in the 1910s. By then it was in the 1930s, and then there was Isidore Epstein in the conservative movement. They came up with some Tanai that they wanted to do. So then it went, and then the Orthodox rabbis went to Rav Uziel, who was Rav Uziel, who was sort of supportive somewhat of the Constantinople thing with changes, but he went ballistic against, because it was conservative, so it was a whole political thing also.
Did Eliezer Berkowitz get taken seriously in the discussion?
So Eliezer Berkowitz also, I think, has something on it, so we'll have to look at it, okay? So that's what we'll begin. We're not going to be able to cover all this next week, but we'll start with Mishpatei Tanaim, and I'll send you the Kuntras.
Regarding today's material, what we were talking about at the end, the Chupah and Nisuin, that it's interesting. The questions, is that directly germane to these later proposals, or is Tanai B'Kiddushin sufficient to accomplish what the practical
Tanai
goals
B'Kiddushin would be sufficient to accomplish it, on the condition that Nisuin is not mevatel the Tanai.
Right. Yeah.
Right. That's where there's a Gemara that says Nisuin is mevatel the Tanai. So the question is, but what? Okay. That's because that gets to Einan Damos Bilat Znut and things like that. Right. And that is in turn connected. So that in turn is connected to understanding common law marriage as well. A lot of different things that are flying around here, and also Afkeinu is in the sugya. We'll talk about Afkeinu a little bit. There'll be a whole separate thing on Afkeinu. Okay. On December 10th. That's how many weeks from now? 2 weeks or 3 weeks from now? 2 weeks from now.
3 weeks.
Whatever. December 10th, Professor Vered Noam is going to be. I invited her to come. And she's going to talk about the first parak of Kiddushin in terms of what the connection between the first part of parak of Kiddushin and the second part of parak of Kiddushin have to do with each other. In other words, the first part talks about the kinyanim, and the second part talks about chiyuvei mitzvot. And she has a very interesting reading on the connection between them, and it has to do with how Chazal viewed marriage. So I invited her to come and speak. I don't know if you know who she is. Very known. She's a professor of Talmud at Tel Aviv University. For a short time we worked together at Midrash Lindenbaum. She was the head of the Beit Midrash for a year or two before she decided she wanted to go into academia. She's a friend of mine, and she has very interesting things to say. So that'll be on December 10th. I think we'll still have my shir also it'll be shorter, but